Alright, well, it's time to get this over with. So, I actually have a topic I want to start with today, Alicia. I think you might be
Okay,
interested in. Starting off with World
which
War
is
One, like we said, the Battle of Belleau Woods happened in 1918 between the Germans, the French, the British, and the Americans. It was one of the first battles that included the Americans in World War One, and also showed the true
hmm
power of the United States Marines during World War One.
I'll
Because
be honest, I'm not very knowledgeable on that one. Like almost every other war you can ask me about, I've got knowledge on it, but I don't know anything about that.
Well, this was really one of the first major engagements the Marines found themselves in on the world stage, at least, that showed the rest of the world that you shouldn't screw with America. At least back then, they showed them that you couldn't screw with America. I don't know so much now. Their ice cream president.
Ice cream president as well.
But yeah, so I figured we'd start things off with World War One. It seems like a good starting place to me. So
Yeah, it is
you got
because
some
it
stuff
has
you can
really
share.
a lot of the components for you. Stuff I can say. I got a lot of stuff we can talk about when it comes to World War One. How it's basically our first start with a lot of things just mechanically. I mean, we literally went from because we still had people riding on horseback. We still had cavalry and stuff in World War One, but we went from people in World War One riding on horseback to many other world wars using little tanks crossing no man's land.
Yeah, that you're right. That was a pretty big change in technology over just a 4 year period to go from horses to tanks. Pretty much
I mean, our
spontaneous, I
first
would
tanks
say.
that we did use, which they're very basic in World War One, like they didn't have a suspension system, or if it did have a suspension system, it was very mediocre. I think the first tank with like a very good suspension system came along during World War Two, and that was about it.
Yeah, it was probably a German tank if I had to guess. Probably a Panzer or something such like that.
Funnily enough, it was a French tank, even though the French are notorious for losing in everything they do.
Mm. Well, of course, the French would choose comfort feature in a tank. Their hoity-toityness, red wine, cheese, and all that shit they do over there.
Oh, you yellow
I wouldn't
I
want to be in a World War
mean,
One tank though. It's basically a metal box with a bunch of BO-ridden men, and then a gun that fires loud enough to make you partially deaf.
I wonder what happened. Like, did people have serious hearing issues, like from the after effects of riding in these tanks or riding alongside these tanks?
Well,
Gotcha.
actually, I happen to know for a fact that yes, they did, and it was one of the biggest health problems veterans of World War One had was actually deafness from tanks and just from battle in general.
Dang. Well, I mean, like, okay, let's just talk about disease in World War One because I mean, disease was one of the main killers. It wasn't even people killing each other; it was disease, lice, nicks, what's it called? Ticks, yeah.
Yeah,
Dysentery, just very unhealthy practices in general cause a lot of people to die from World War One.
yep. Who could
Plus,
forget trench foot?
trench foot is just nasty in general. It's basically a glorified gangrene.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't really know what the generals expected when you shove a bunch of human bodies close to each other in a ditch, basically just a glorified ditch. Most of them they had a toilet in the trench, so not like you could go squat out on the battlefield without getting blown up.
What I really think is insane is the medical practices during that time because the medical practices they were not awesome. You had to work with what you had. So I mean you bandage with dirty clothes or dirty bandages because most bandages at that time were not like our bandages now when they're very easily disposable. They were all cloth at that time. They had some light clot and sterile stuff, but the most sterile you really got in the field then was putting a putting a what's it called, a lighter or a flame to the wound to cauterize it, and that didn't even work very well.
Yeah,
Oh, you just got blasted, dude.
yeah, I know.
My
I'm doing
bad.
very bad this round. You wash it out with canteen water too. That was really the only way of cleaning wounds they had. They didn't have a lot of
Canteen water.
sanitizers.
It was probably like Camp Lejeune water. Have you seen all those ads? It's like,
Yeah,
if you drunk water from Camp Lejeune, you
yeah. My
for
dad's whole
compensation.
family was in Camp Lejeune during that time, and they haven't claimed any money, even though both of them died from cancer. So
I hate you.
probably something
But I
claimed
mean,
there. Yeah, buddy.
it really, you have to have a certain mindset to be able to go through all that and then go home afterwards. I think PTSD was a really big factor of a lot of the men coming home during that time. Like just the being under constant fight or flight. We see that in our veterans now coming back from Iraq or any active areas and war. Even if you're not in an active area, but being always constantly taught fight or flight causes people to have adverse side effects in their life.
Oh yeah.
Um, I mean, example, my dad, he has really bad nightmares and night terrors, and it causes him to wake up throughout the night screaming and whatnot because of when he was in the military, he was always taught you be on your feet, be on your toes. He was in an active area. He was not close to the active area, but he was in an active area, and they would have bombings over top, and they would have to go through the drills and whatnot of putting the tarps over it so it would look like sand, putting the tarps over this and that. So I mean, being constantly overwhelmed with the 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 knowing, am I gonna die if I go around this corner? Am I gonna die doing if I am I gonna die going to sleep or something? That's also scary. Plus shell shock is terrifying
Oh
to
yeah.
think about.
You can only imagine how much worse it was being in a confined area where you know if you stick your head up, you're probably going to get shot by a sniper or hit with an artillery round from the opposing trench. And of course, the people in the other trench were just as fearful of the same thing, you know? A lot of World War One was
Hmm.
just people hiding in the trenches waiting for orders to get run over the top and get gunned down by machine gun fire or artillery shots. And most of the war was just spent waiting in a trench, having artillery blast overhead, tanks crossing the land, engaging in warfare, chemical warfare. Now that's a good starting
That
place right there.
crap was freaky.
Mustard
Chemical
gas,
warfare,
chlorine
the
gas.
stuff they use, mustard gas, everybody talks about mustard gas, but nobody talks about bromine. If you know what bromine is, it's a couple of mixes of sulfur and whatnot, and it creates a very like dark liquid brown in color liquid, and when it's in a gas form, it's even more deadly. Um, but I mean, scientists now, when they handle bromine, you see them. They'll put on like a whole like suit to handle it, and but we use it in a lot of like thermometers. Well, thermometers, it's mercury, unless it's a scientific thermometer, then that's bromine. But I mean, you can look up now. Red makes bromine and everything. It's kind of cool, but still very dangerous to use. And it's a lung irritant that causes people to cough basically up their lungs. If you've ever seen somebody smoke or something and they get that coughing fit from smoking, it's like that but like times 10.
Yeah.
And usually once you get that cough, that it doesn't really go away.
Oh yeah.
Plus, the effects from a lot of these gases had not been studied yet, and so looking back at it, it was kind of, ooh, it was crazy actually.
Plus, it lingered. Like, you never knew when you were safe or not because gas would linger in, like, the bottom of crater shells for longer periods of time. So, imagine you run out on the battlefield and you're trying to avoid dying. You jump into a crater field. You just got
Fuck.
blasted, by the way. You jump into a crater and there's
So
gas,
good.
mustard gas, lingering from the mustard gas shell that went off there. Or the bromine gas shell that went
Did you
off
just
there and
die?
you just die. Yes, I just died, but not from a gas
Oh
attack.
yeah, that was me.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? You never knew what was
Yeah.
truly safe to breathe air or not. You were just having the paranoia of always having to have your gas mask at the ready.
Plus, gas masks at the time were potato sacks covered in what was it? I can't remember what the liquid was, but they were potato sacks covered in a special liquid
A
that
sealing
all it
agent.
did, and it had like a glassless lens in it so you could see out of it. That's literally it. It was like it was somebody's child's project put together.
Yeah. Some of the best gas masks of the war were the British ones because they actually had like some of the first rebreathing technology being invented at that point, and
Hmm.
the air filters using like I actually think it was beeswax that they used for one of the first air filters, or maybe it was
That
honeycomb.
It was they used beeswax to help with the sealant part of it.
Yeah.
Because beeswax, if you've ever used it, is a very good sealant. You have it in your lip glosses. It seals moisture in and allows it to slowly dissipate.
Oh yeah. And the British were the first to come up with having the big canister hanging down that had a lot of layers of filters in it instead of just one. But they
Yeah.
couldn't have it constantly fixed to your face. They wanted to have the versatility of it to be removed quickly.
Leading into that, let's talk about World War II, just gas in general World War II, because it was used a lot. I mean, with the how do we put this? With the people, the 6 million people who died from not just gas, but all these
Yeah.
different horrific acts at like these different concentration camps. Even though gassing was a pretty torturous way of dying for them. Hmm. What's your opinions on that?
Yeah, there's definitely no doubt about it that concentration camps were a terrible thing and Holocaust was just purely awful. I mean,
Well, like the gas with it. That's my
yeah,
question.
well, the gas was terrible, but I think that was, considering all the ways that the Nazis executed them, gas was one of the worst or the least worst ways you could go out. You know, there was cases of them being people being raped to death, people being strapped to tank fronts and having their whole bodies blown off, being slowly dissected in horrific experiments. And it wasn't just the Nazis that did that kind of stuff. You know, I feel like the Nazis overshadow what
We
the
were
Japanese
guilty,
did.
plus many other European countries were guilty as well.
Yes, I feel like all that overshadows what the Japanese did, you know, to the Chinese and those
Oh dear
specific
God.
islands. Unit, what
Not
was it?
even Chinese. It was the Japanese tortured Chinese, Philippines. They just went on a very bad tyrannous rampage when it came to torture.
Have you heard
I
of, I
mean,
believe, Unit 702?
yep.
The
Yes, I have.
Japanese scientific unit that did all kinds of horrific experiments like skinning people alive, infecting whole villages with the bubonic plague.
Funnily enough, skinning somebody alive, as long as you resupply them with blood, they will not die, which is a scary thing to think about.
Yep. And how else would they find that out? Oh, yep. They skinned somebody alive and supplied them with enough blood for them to live.
And there's
It's
cases of,
just.
I mean, men being tied up while they raped girls and boys. They were not okay. A lot of people were like, "Well, they only rape women. They rape men too. That was not foreign to them. I mean, the hole's gold." But
God.
it's
More.
really freaky to think about these boys and girls being raped in front of their fathers and mothers, begging them for help when help never really came to them, and it didn't happen for the fathers either. There's no help for anybody. And so I really do think the reason why we have anime and a lot of our cutesy shows now is to cover up Japan's war crimes.
Oh yeah, they're like, oh guys, please forget anything bad that ever happened. That's why, you know, a lot of countries in that area like South Korea, China, they still don't really like Japan that much, even though they're all forced to kind of be friendly due to NATO and all these other organization treaties. But they really still are pretty upset with them.
Yeah, I would be too. I mean, you came around to all these different islands that's possibly part of us and everything, and then you're gonna kill and murder and rape our villagers. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna be friendly to you either.
Yep. The only reason that the
Did you
United
just get
States.
blasted, Ethan? Because that was me with the launcher.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't me. But yeah, the only reason the United States is kind of, I guess, friendly with
Oh,
the
I
Japanese. I
see.
mean, we pretty much rebuilt their whole society after World War II because we essentially just destroyed everything that they had. They lost all their external claims. They lost just about half of their own islands that they had before the war. And we destroyed
Do you
many of their
think that the
cities.
bombing was too much?
You talking about the atomic bombings?
Yeah. Do you think those bombings were too much?
Well, I mean, when you look at everything that was happening at that time, I feel like that. I feel it was warranted that it had to be done. It was a necessary evil, and that's because the Japanese were hell bent on absolutely fighting to the last man. And they had estimated that 500,000 troops NATO troops would lose their
Guys,
lives during the mainland invasion of Japan. So that's why they decided to
yeah,
use the atomic bombs instead of an invasion force.
yeah. I mean, it would have been worse when it's going on their land for sure, but still, I feel I still have a bit of sympathy for it.
Of
Is that
course,
bad?
there's no reason not to have sympathy. You know, a fun fact actually, until I believe it was a year ago, um, every single Purple Heart given out was made during World War II because they made 500,000 Purple Heart badges to give to Marines or soldiers that they thought would die during the mainland invasion of Japan. So they had minted hundreds of thousands of Purple Hearts in advance of that invasion that never happened. So they've been using them for the last 77 years,
Yeah, I would imagine so.
which is just insane if you think about it.
Sorry, I'm spraying Tyson down. He got me some nail polish.
Mm.
Trying to keep an eye on him while doing this is not easy. Um, Leading into that, just that total warfare on civilians that have done nothing. Let's talk about Vietnam.
Actually, before we get into Vietnam, I have an interesting, so I guess it's a conspiracy you could say, to bring up with you. Now, you know, after World War II, atomic bombs were the main thing that every single government in the world wanted to get their hands on, and the only country that
Yeah,
had them for about 4 years was the United States until Soviet spy intelligence stole blueprints for one. Now, are you familiar with the Castle Bravo test? You know, the largest atomic bomb the
yeah, I
United
know what
States
you're talking about.
detonated that
Yeah,
they claimed had underestimated its potential and it ended up irradiating several inhabited islands within the zone that it was detonated in.
yeah.
Now, there's a theory that they did know the power of the bomb and that they only detonated it there so they could study the adverse effects of ionizing radiation on the human body without directly nuking them. Because those
I mean,
islanders got covered in fallout.
it would definitely make sense. I mean, if I was on a military track, if I was a part of the military or just like ever in general trying to conduct experiment, what better to do on that island that hardly anybody inhabits or knows anything about? So the people, majority of the public, wouldn't really care. Of course, you would still have the peace, the tree huggers and whatnot, but it doesn't matter. When the tree huggers matter, when you have the majority of the public not really caring, it just makes the tree huggers seem crazy in the end
Exactly.
of things.
They claimed it was an accident that the islanders got radiated, but a lot of people didn't think it was. And it's really tragic because the islanders thought that the radioactive fallout falling on them was snow because they'd never seen snow before. And of course, islanders, they had no idea what an atomic bomb was either. Nobody told them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people may not believe it, but that is, I think that's partially attuned to some Pacific Islander, just not even Pacific Islander, but just Islander in general. A lot of the offsite islands, not many people care about it, so it's seen as not as important or anything like that. This is a lot on the behalf of the U.S. issue. It's just been an underlying issue that not many people paid attention to.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to switch games here in a moment?
Yeah, we can. I hope everybody's enjoying the
Because you're winning too
Last
much, and I don't
Share
really like
Online.
that. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I hope y'all are enjoying the gameplay, but I know I suck ass at this game. Plus, it's a very corny thing to say, so I'm gonna cut that out.
Don't cut it out.
Right. Anyways, continuing on. Yes, you wanted to segue into Vietnam, I believe you said.
Yes. Because every time I think of Vietnam, guess what game I think of?
Call of Duty Cold War.
Yes! I swear to
Uh,
God, you had me going on that loop for like 10 minutes. You're like, have you turned around yet?
oh yeah, the Red Door Labyrinth.
Yes!
I thought that
I
was a funny.
still hate you for that. That was not funny.
It was pretty funny. But yeah,
But
Vietnam.
the traps are crazy in Vietnam. Me and my dad were talking about that the other day. The traps that they had.
Oh, the Vietnamese traps were very creative for what they had.
Yeah, for what they had. I mean,
Yeah.
smearing crap on. More. What's a more adventurous one? Another adventurous one is when they put a bullet in the ground, put a pin underneath the bullet. The pressure of the soldier stepping on it caused the bullet to eject, shooting up through the soldier's foot.
Oh yeah. Oh,
That's scary.
they would build fake bridges over rivers, and they would line bamboo spikes in the bottom of the river.
Hey, Ethan, you join me?
But yeah, they had a lot of different traps. Most of them used bamboo spikes, but a couple of them were, oh god, a couple of them were more creative, like the grenade canister. Now they would take a couple of cans, just standard old cans that you can get anywhere, and they would take and put
Mm-hmm.
grenades in them with a tripwire along trees, so that when you stepped over the tripwire, the grenades would come out. They already had the pins pulled, and they would detonate right there at your feet.
That's so scary. Like I would actually pee myself.
Not to mention the constant spike pits. I mean, it was a jungle, so it's not exactly like you could see where you were going very easily.
Yeah.
And
You sound like a nerd when you say, I believe that's what they called them.
shut up, alright? This was your idea, anyways.
Yeah, but still.
Right. Well, let's move on to the difficulties that they had even fighting in the Vietnamese forest, anyways.
Oh, wait, my car. Okay, so what are some difficulties? I mean, I'm pretty smart on the topic. I just want to hear you yap a little bit.
Well, first off, you really just gonna leave me here? Alright, I see how it is.
Shut up. Just get in the vehicle.
Well, first off, it's jungle, so it's very dense. They couldn't get their main armor, their tanks and stuff, into the forest because of how dense it was. So they had to come up with some creative ways of getting into there. The first
Mm-hmm.
thing they tried is the United States government offered a military contract to a company called Laterno. Laterno makes a lot of heavy equipment, so they
Yeah.
contracted them to make I believe they called it a jungle crusher, and essentially it was a massive bulldozer with spiked wheels that they would use to push over trees. But well, the only problem with that is that it didn't work.
Yeah.
It would get stuck in the mud because it's a rainforest over there, not just a normal one. So it would get
Yeah, I
stuck
was
in the
about to say,
mud.
I imagine it'd be pretty swampy. It's got to be kind of a specific
Yeah,
terrain of tires.
it would get stuck in the mud and trenches, and then it wouldn't be able to do its job. The next thing they tried after that was firebombing. They would use heavy lift helicopters to drop firebombs to create landing sites for Huey helicopters or for them to drop vehicles with. And then
And
they
how did that
figured
work
out
out?
well, they figured out that you couldn't burn down a whole forest just because they had a lot of pushback because the quote unquote hippie movement was very big at the time. A lot of people
Tree
were
hugger hippies?
anti-war, tree hugger and anti-war hippies.
So like Mr. Hobbs.
I guess. I don't know that he's
Oh,
that
no,
much
no,
of a
no,
tree hugger.
no! You know what we forgot? Oh, never mind. I lied. I have some.
Pacifism. A lot of pacifists then. They despised the Vietnam War. So they were very upset when they found out they were also burning down thousands of acres of forest just to fight the war as well.
It's not that bad. They're overreacting.
Although those
We
same
love
people were
America. We
pretty
love
quiet.
war.
The same people were pretty quiet when they were like destroying whole villages and stuff during World War II just so they could get the Nazis.
Well, the Nazis were seen as a horrible, horrible Axis power. Even though, like, okay, they were bad, but not all. Okay, well, how do I put this? The idea was great. The fascismal idea was okay, and then corrupt people got a hold of it.
Hitler.
Well, yeah,
Hitler,
but I
Hitler.
mean,
All the leaders that had an H in their name were pretty bad.
you you ain't never lied. But I mean, for the most part, it wasn't horrific. I mean, there's good ideas, bad people, and there's bad ideas, bad people. Like,
Back to Vietnam, though. Bad ideas and
uh,
bad people. You know what was a really bad idea?
what?
Agent Orange. That's also what they tried to
Oh,
remove trees and such with, and to keep
yeah.
down pests. Because yeah, insects were another huge problem, and other pests because well,
Oh, I can
there's of
only
course.
imagine like mosquitoes, dude. I get bit up out here. Imagine being in like a dense rainforest where it's all humid and swampy and whatnot.
Yep, mosquitoes the size of small birds buzzing around you, sucking the blood out of you, getting malaria and all other kinds of bad diseases like that.
Either we gotta go. I'm getting shot up out here.
Hang on, I'm getting money.
I don't care. We have to go.
So what do you know about Agent Orange? Because I know a lot of bad things that it did to people.
The fact that I mean, there's a lot of splashback. Gosh dang it. There's a lot of splashback from, what's it called? Agent Orange. A lot of people actually, we dropped it on our own people a lot of times when we're just trying to clear out a small area, which is kind of
Yeah,
sad.
not to
And
mention that.
good.
Not to
Also, I
mention
got killed
yeah.
because of you, and I'm not very happy.
Well, that sounds like a you problem. But not
You know
to
what?
mention the absolutely awful side effects that it caused to just people in villages that weren't even part of it that had it blown back on them.
It literally looked like somebody took heroin and the crocodile drug 3 times the dosage you should ever. It was like somebody took fentanyl, but instead of fentanyl, it was just straight up killing you and melted off your skin.
Pretty much. And it caused a lot of cancers and birth defects from pregnant women and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Definitely the
I
only
mean,
sensible
I
side
thought
effect
I
was
was a
cancer,
birth
though.
defect. Sweet Jesus.
Yeah, people being born with extra limbs or twins being born conjoined together more frequently. All kinds of awful, awful stuff.
Yeah.
I
I
definitely
think
think. Go ahead.
I think it's I think the United wasn't wasn't Agent Orange an experimental thing? Well, most of the stuff was experimental, but specifically Agent Orange.
Yes, it was. They basically just used our troops, the native villagers over there, and any living thing pretty much as an experiment test site for it.
Oh my. United States, we committed our fair share of war crimes in
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam, but it was justified because they're the bad guys.
You know what wasn't experimental that they dropped on people and was very effective though?
What?
Napalm.
Woo! Can't you just basically make palm with like plastic and gas?
Yep, styrofoam, gas, and oil. But the stuff that we did, we dropped it on we dropped it on them uh pretty regularly. Used it to
How
clear out
regularly would you
forests.
say?
Well, I think during the height of the Vietnam War, I read this, I had this looked up earlier. During the height of the Vietnam War, they were doing a napalm bombing mission every 4 hours.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow, that's awesome.
Any plane that they could get to fly, they would strap napalm canisters to the bottom of it, drop it on the forest, on the enemies, or just on random villages. They were using World War II planes that were left over, propeller engine planes, well into the age of jet aircraft. Propeller engine planes, they were using B-52 bombers. Basically, anything that would fly, they would strap some napalm to and say, yep, go get them, Tiger. And a lot of times they would
Transferring
really do
over to
miss.
like theory territory really quick. Do you think our current have you ever seen a aerial applicator or basically the people who crop dust farms?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think we got a lot of our ideas from Vietnam, World War II, and World War One when it comes to crop dusting the farms with planes? Because we
Oh,
saw how
definitely.
effective it was over a large span of area.
Oh, definitely did. Because the way a crop duster is set up now is pretty much the same way they used to spread Agent Orange. They didn't drop it from a bomb. They literally just had spray nozzles of it, and they would fly like B-52s or C-130s or what are they called? Dauntless aircraft, and just spray the heck out of everything.
All people have Agent Orange. We've got Red 40.
Yeah, I think Agent Orange is probably significantly worse than Red 40, though.
You never know. That might just be the short-term consequences of Agent Orange. Imagine the long-term consequences of Red 40.
True. Well, Red 40
Especially
is
if you...
petroleum.
I love me some my petroleum.
But that's getting off subject. Yeah. The Vietnam War, Agent Orange. We kind of did to the Vietnamese what the Japanese did to that whole region in World War II and the Vietnam War. We dropped a lot of chemicals on them. And, of course, our government said it's just to reduce the bugs and risk of infection and such for our troops. It's definitely not to try to experiment with them, and leads
Or
to a lot of scientific discoveries, which actually Agent Orange did lead to a lot of scientific discoveries about the human body because of the effects it had on the human body of the people we dropped it on.
really, like what? What do you know?
Well, I know it helped them identify at least 2 new cancer types that were caused by Agent Orange, and it helped them do more research into cancer curing birth defects, especially because, well, when you have a rise in birth defects, you have more of an opportunity to study birth defects.
Yeah. Um, I think it's also kind of insane how we say that during the Vietnam War, they were the bodies, not we were. Like, honestly, I think the United States played more of a horrible role than a lot of people think we did.
Yeah, we're definitely not scot-free from any kind of thing like that. We're very much into our war crimes. We're just better at covering them up.
Wanting
Remember,
to lose.
it's only a war crime if you lose the war.
Yep. I want to loop back really quick to like the French and yeah, just the French in general, France in general, and every significant war we've had, and
Oh my god.
wars in their own country. Can we just talk about how the French are big losers? Like they
Yeah,
have not won a single thing. They may win a battle, but they have never won a war.
yeah. The only time they ever really were good at that was when Napoleon was in charge, and then they exiled him, so kind of
Thinking that was a smart decision.
got rid of their only good player they had, pretty much.
And I mean, I think the French have always been lovers, not fighters. Speaking about just let them eat cake, even though that wasn't a line she actually said, the let them eat cake sort of thing, the Renaissance and everything like that. They have always been more so of a lover, not a fighter.
Not to mention that, we actually only got involved in Vietnam because we were bailing out the French, because they were the ones that initially started it.
Oh, wow. How history writes itself.
Tell me about it.
I mean, they brought us a lot of good things like yummy food and a lot of good wines, and that's not it. And
Yeah,
art and some different types of music and instruments. But even then, a lot of our instruments came from like Spain and whatnot.
historically, they've always been the first to raise the white flag in any kind of conflict.
That's sad. That's really sad.
Yep, they got pushed over by the Germans in World War One and World War Two.
um, here's a funny character I want to talk about is Benito Mussolini.
Ooh,
'Cause
the
that
Italian
really
dictator.
reminds me of the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny, and I was just singing it in my head a minute ago when we started talking about World War II. So now that topic's stuck in my head. Okay, Benito Mussolini and the Blue Meanie. So, what do you know about Benito Mussolini?
Well, I know he wasn't a great guy. I also know that he was publicly publicly hung beaten and stoned after he was defeated in World War II. And he was a good
That's
friend of
awesome.
Hitler's.
Wow, that's awesome. He was the creator of fascismo because fascismo is an Italian word.
Yep, he did create that.
And I mean, it started off as a socialism concept, so it wasn't. Wow, you know how we were just talking about the French?
Yeah.
Roblox right now is having like a Paris tour, like of the art gallery. That's ironic, but I mean, what was it? I'm trying to think of the name. Fascismo was originally started as a socialism topic against higher taxes, and it was a form of socialism, essentially. That's how it started off as for the working man. And then he actually got kicked out of his political party, his political campaign, and everything because they thought he was going too far extreme. So that definitely did not play a good role. I mean, him and Hitler practically had similar think concepts when it comes to fascism or Nazism or anything
Ideologies.
like that. Yes. And they both got kicked out of their
They had
civics
very
and
similar
political
ideologies.
parties because the people thought they were going too far.
Yep. And the only reason that uh,
Benito Mussolini.
Benito, my bad. The only reason that Benito was somewhat better than Hitler was because, he didn't kill 6 million Jews for nothing.
He was a part of it though.
He did sanction it, but he didn't do it.
I really quick, I do want to talk about Alois Hitler, which was Adolf Hitler's father.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, he was and I mean very abusive to Hitler. Because he thought when Hitler first started, I mean, everybody knows Hitler went to art school, whoop-de-doo. But when Hitler was going after these art dreams, he was the main person against him doing it and gave him whoopings very often.
Mm-hmm. I have heard
And
that story.
actually, after Hitler's mother died, Hitler's father, Alois Hitler, ended up marrying his cousin, his first cousin.
You know something else interesting about that? Speaking about Hitler's mother passing away, the
Hmm.
doctor that treated his mother was a Jewish doctor, and he was
Yep.
actually personally spared by Hitler during the Holocaust.
Talk about being a token person. Like, you have token black people and token white people. You have a token Jew.
Well, that tokenness saved his life.
Oh my god, I just heard Tyson mess with dishes. But, let's continue along this line, this subject of family. Hitler was mama's boy, or at least a cousin's boy, because that was practically his mother. But she coddled him throughout his life,
Oh,
heavily.
yes.
He was
That
very heavily
brings
coddled.
that brings up another interesting thing about Hitler, though. In his book Mein Kampf, he did bring up a lot of the tragic backstory of his mother and all that.
Hmm.
Funny enough, he also mentions a couple very important American people by name.
Like
Walt
who?
Disney, Walt Disney and Henry Ford were both mentioned in Hitler's Mein Kampf as people that he was accustomed with.
A custom with? How are you? Like, a custom with as in friends? Or like
Yep.
acquaintances?
It is said that Henry Ford had a framed photo of Hitler on his desk.
Oh.
Now, a lot of people, or a lot of things that they had in common were their ideologies and beliefs. Henry Ford invented the 40-hour work week, but he also believed a lot in socialism in the way that he ran his company. At that time, it was run much like a socialist democracy, really.
So everybody had like equal pay and whatnot?
Kind of close. A lot of the higher-ups still had higher pay, but most of the factory workers had the exact same pay, no matter if they were managers or just line workers.
Oh, that's smart. That's a little crazy.
And it's very well known that, or at least partially well known, that Walt Disney was an anti-Semite.
Oh
He
yeah,
did not
I
like
think
Jewish people.
everybody knows that. He was also a womanizer, misogynist, playboy, billionaire after Disney took off. So
Oh yes,
I mean,
apparently
he was
Hitler
a good
was.
guy in general. The guy who created a lot of our iconic cartoon people. Are He's not great at all.
Oh yeah, Hitler was apparently very fond of Walt Disney's cartoon shorts, and Walt Disney had met with Nazis that were in the animation field.
Oh, that's awesome. That's just amazing. Can
Now,
you hear the sarcasm in my voice about that?
allegedly, all this happened before World War II, but there is some evidence to suggest that they were at least friendly with each other during the course of the war, up until the end, of course, of Hitler's life.
Hitler shot himself in the foot during the war. Not like literally, but the term shot himself in the foot. And he also apparently shot himself in the head.
Yeah.
But I
He
feel
went
like
exactly against his own ideologies.
if they had kept at it just a little bit longer, Nazis, the whole Nazi party could have reigned victorious.
Oh yes, the Third Reich. I tell you what Hitler's problem was, and he even admitted it himself later, that he did not want to fight a war on two fronts, but he started a war on two fronts when he attacked the Russians. The Soviet Union was completely chill with Hitler because
I was
Joseph
about to say
Stalin.
they were a neutral party because Joseph Stalin and him signed a neutrality agreement,
Oh yeah, Hitler
and then
and Joseph
he
Stalin
went
had signed
back on
a
that
neutrality,
neutrality agreement.
and a lot of historians agree that's what cost Hitler the war because America wouldn't have been able to devote enough resources to fight them because we were also fighting the Japanese in the Pacific at the same time.
What is kind of cool is how the Russians at that time fought. It was because Hitler had a very good like spring and summer push against the Russians. I mean, he pushed them back into Russia and captured some land there. But what ended up killing him was the winter, because that is what Russians are accustomed to, is their winter fighting. And so when that snow came, and those, first of all, it was lack of ammunition, lack of uniforms. These people were freezing and whatnot, and
Oh
hardly
yeah,
getting by. And then you have the Russians where they had their uniforms. Their uniforms were mostly white. They had some brown and black specks, but the uniforms were mostly white, and they are also accustomed to fighting in the snow, with some of their tactics being them laying on the snow, not packing snow, packing a small layer of snow, then letting fresh snow fall on their positions, basically almost creating an igloo around themselves, and they were able to easily counterattack the Hitler and his forces. So it caused Hitler to have a huge setback in that category.
oh yeah. Not only that, but the Russians used a tactic that came about during the Napoleonic Wars when Napoleon attacked Russia. That
Hmm.
every single bit of territory they lost, they would destroy anything useful on that territory. They would take whatever crops they could carry with them, supplies, ammunitions, etc., and then they would burn the villages behind them into the ground.
So a
And the
total war.
Germans, oh yeah, the Germans had come accustomed to just taking over an area and then getting their supplies from the local villages and stuff. Well, all the local
Hmm.
villages and such had been destroyed already by the Russians on the retreat, so there wasn't exactly a lot of supplies left for them to get.
Yeah. So it was basically, well, dang it, they got to it before I did.
Essentially. And Hitler was not happy about that. And
Who would be happy about that?
Speaking on World War II and the American, going back to America and Japan, I have a
Hmm.
specific person in mind I'd like to bring up. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. His name was Chesty Puller. Well, Chesty was his nickname, but that's what everybody referred to him as, Chesty Puller. He was a Marine that
Chesty's
fought in the
nuts.
Pacific. Well, he is the most highly decorated Marine ever. He got 5 Navy Crosses for his actions in World War II and the Korean War.
That's great.
He had a lot of very famous stands on many of the different islands there, and he supported
Hmm.
his Marines all the way through. That was his ideal. He was a general, but he was always on the front lines with his soldiers, with his men, motivating them. He had
It's
one
really
very famous
surprising that
quote.
he lived.
Oh yeah, he has one very famous quote of him saying, "This was from World War II during the Japanese islands." This was a very
Uh,
famous quote of his. He said, "The enemy is surrounding us, and it's good. We won't have to go looking for them now." He was
yeah.
very, very keen on fighting, and he absolutely hated anybody that was an enemy of the United States. And up until, I'm not sure when exactly they stopped, but up until at least the 1960s, my grandfather, who was a Marine, said that their drill instructor, during their nighttime prayers, would say and pray for Chesty Puller that he lives a long and happy life. Because he was that much of a Marine Corps legend, and he probably still is to this very day.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know much about seriously, Tyson. I don't know much about Marine Corps to be honest with you because that is not what my family are really in. It's always Army and Air Force. But I can tell you that uh, they are very, very strong in what they do. Very strong-willed. They go through a lot of more rigorous training, but they are not the smartest at all. They are known for being the crayon eaters of the branches because they're a lot. People don't give them credit for how smart they usually are, but it never is good when they are usually in front of a lot of things. So that's why they're called the crayon eaters. But
Yep.
Marines are, I think Marines should be looked upon more highly than they are currently
Oh yeah. I
in
have
society or
utmost
anything.
respect for them. The Marine Corps is different from every single other branch of our military, really. Because they have a mantra, once a Marine, always a Marine. It's a lifelong thing, even when you're
Semper
out of the
Fi, do or
military,
die.
technically. Exactly. Even when you're technically out of the military, you're still a Marine until the day you die. Well, closing on there, speaking of things dying, I think that's a good place to end the podcast. We've been going for quite a while at this point.
Like how long?
I think we've got about 40 minutes, so I think this is a good place for us to end it off. What do you think?
Yeah, seems good with me.